Part 1. The Discovery Captain Marcus Reed stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Aurora, watching the stars drift past through the main window. His crew had been traveling for 3 months now, deeper into space than any human had ever gone. Before, they were part of Earth's first long-distance space mission. Looking for new planets and maybe even other life forms, the ship was quiet except for the soft humming of the engines. Most of the crew were at their stations doing their daily checks and keeping the ship running smoothly. Reed liked these peaceful moments. Space was big and empty, but it felt full of possibilities. Dr. Tom Wilson, the ship's science officer, looked up from his computer screen. "Captain, I'm getting something strange on the sensors," he said. Reed walked over to Wilson's station. "What kind of strange?" "It looks like a distress signal, but it's not like anything we've seen before. The pattern is completely different." From our technology, Reed felt his heart beat faster. A distress signal meant someone was in trouble. But if it wasn't human technology, that meant they had found what they were looking for: other life in the universe. "Can you locate where it's coming from?" Reed asked. Wilson worked on his computer for a few minutes. "Yes, sir. It's about 2 hours away at full speed. The signal is getting weaker, so whatever is sending it might not last much longer." Reed didn't need to think long. Set course for the signal. Maximum speed. The Aurora changed direction and picked up speed. The crew became more alert as word spread through the ship that they might have found alien life. Some were excited, others were nervous. No one knew what they would find. 2 hours later, they arrived at the location. What they saw made everyone stop and stare. Floating in space was a ship unlike anything humans had ever built. It was long and curved, with smooth metal that seemed to shine with its own light. But the ship was badly damaged. Parts of it were torn open, and debris floated around it. "Life signs?" Reed asked. "Yes, sir," said Officer Lisa Park, who ran the ship's sensors. "I'm reading multiple life forms inside. Some are very weak." Reed made his decision quickly. "Prepare the rescue shuttles. Dr. Nina Walsh, get the medical bay ready. We're bringing them aboard." Dr. Walsh, the ship's doctor, nodded and hurried away. The rescue team put on their spacesuits and took a small shuttle over to the damaged alien ship. Inside the alien vessel, they found something that broke their hearts. The ship was full of beings that looked somewhat like humans but were taller and thinner, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Many were hurt or sick, were already dead. The rescue team carefully brought the survivors back to the Aurora. There were 23 of them still alive, though some were in very bad condition. Dr. Walsh and her medical team worked hard to help them, even though they had never treated alien injuries before. The strongest of the survivors was an older being who seemed to be their leader. When he was well enough to talk, the ship's computer tried to translate his language. It took several hours, but slowly they began to understand each other. The alien's name was Kalen, and his people were called Velkans. What he told the humans made their blood run cold. "We were running," Kalen said through the computer translator. His voice was weak but filled with sadness. "Our world was attacked by the Dominion. It came with giant ships and powerful weapons. We could not fight them." Reed sat beside Kellen's medical bed. "Who is the Dominion?" Kellen's large eyes filled. With what looked like tears, they rule most of the galaxy. "They take people from their worlds and make them slaves. My people, we were peaceful. We had no army, no weapons. The Dominion said we were weak, so we would make good workers." Dr. Walsh checked Kellen's condition while he talked. The alien was getting stronger, but Reed could see the fear in his eyes. "They took millions of my people," Kalen continued, "put them in ships and sent them to work on other worlds. My family, my children. I don't know where they are now." Captain Reed felt sick. The idea of entire worlds being enslaved was horrible. "How did you escape?" "A few of us stole a ship during the attack. We tried to save as many as we could, but the Dominion ships chased us. They damaged our ship badly before we got away." Over the next few days, as more Velkans recovered, they told similar stories. The Dominion was a huge empire that had been conquering worlds for thousands of years. They would study a planet and its people, then decide how to use them. Strong species became soldiers or gladiators. Smart ones became researchers or engineers. Weak ones became basic workers. But the worst news was yet to come. Kalen asked to speak with Reed privately. When they were alone, the Velkin leader pulled out a small device that had survived the attack on his ship. Captain Reed, Kellen said, his voice very serious. The Dominion already knows about your world. Reed's heart stopped. What do you mean? Kalen activated the device, and it showed a holographic image. Reed recognized it immediately. It was Earth, with all its blue oceans and white clouds. They sent scout ships to your system several of your years ago. They studied your people. From far away, this device contains their report. The holographic display changed to show images of human cities, armies, and technology. There were notes written in the Dominion language, which the computer slowly translated. Read the words with growing horror. Species designation, human. Classification, primitive warrior slave stock. Population, 8.2 billion. Military capability. Basic projectile and explosive weapons. Threat level, minimal. Recommended harvest date. Next expansion cycle. Harvest date. Ellie nodded sadly. That is what they call it when they come to take people from their worlds. Why, according to this report, your Earth is scheduled for harvesting soon. Maybe in 1 or 2 of your years. Reed felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Earth was in danger, and nobody back home knew it. Billions of people were going about their daily lives, not knowing that slave ships were coming for. Then why are you telling me this? Reed asked. Kalen looked at him with those large, dark eyes. Because you saved us when you could have just flown away. Because you showed kindness to strangers. The Dominion has ruled through fear for so long that most species just give up when they see the ships coming. But maybe your people are different. Maybe you will fight. Reed stood up, his mind racing. Retro might raid by the retro God read around red eye after red eye. How could they possibly warn Earth in time? And what could humanity do against an empire that controlled most of the galaxy? But as he looked at Kellen and thought about the billions of people back on Earth, people with families and dreams and hopes for the future, Reed knew they had to try. How long do we have? He asked. Kellen checked his device again. The report says your world will be harvested in the next expansion cycle. For the Dominion, that means sometime in the next 2 years. But Captain Reed, you must understand when they come, they will bring many ships and millions of soldiers. No world has ever successfully fought them off. Red looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth continued spinning, peacefully, unaware of the danger heading its way. But now Reed knew the truth, and he had to get that truth back home. Part 2. The Intelligence Network Admiral Kate Morrison sat in her office at Earth's Deep Space Command, reading Captain Reed's report for the 3rd time. The words on the screen seemed impossible to believe, but the evidence was right there. Photos of the Velkin survivors, recordings of their testimonies, and most frightening of all, the Dominion database showing Earth marked for harvesting. Morrison had been in the military for 30 years. She had seen wars and conflicts, but nothing like this. An entire galaxy-spanning empire that treated intelligent beings like cattle, and Earth was next on their list. She pressed a button on her desk. Get me the president immediately. Out within an hour, Morrison was in a secure video call with world leaders from every major nation. President Santos listened carefully as Morrison explained the situation. The room was silent when she finished. How long do we have? President Santos asked. According to the Dominion records, somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, Morrison replied. But we can't be sure. They might come earlier. The British Prime Minister leaned forward on his screen. What do we know about their military capabilities? Not enough, Morrison admitted. Right. That's why I'm requesting permission for Operation Blackout. We need to send a team into Dominion space to gather intelligence. We need to know what we're facing. The Chinese premier spoke up. This sounds extremely dangerous. How can we send people into enemy territory when we know so little? Morrison had been thinking about this problem since she read Reed's report. Captain Reed's team captured some Dominion technology from the damaged ships that attacked the Vulcans. Our scientists are working to understand it. If we can figure out how their systems work, we might be able to disguise one of our ships. President Santos looked grim. Who would volunteer for such a mission? I already have someone in mind. Morrison said. Commander Jake Thompson. He's our best pilot and has experience with covert operations. 3 weeks later, Commander Thompson stood in the hangar, looking at his ship. The Shadow Walker didn't look like much. It was a small, fast vessel designed for stealth missions. But now it had been modified with captured Dominion technology. The hull had been reshaped to match Dominion ship designs, and the engines had been altered to produce the same energy signature as alien vessels. Thompson's team consisted of 5 other volunteers. Lieutenant Amy Chen was their technology expert. Sergeant Mike Torres had experience with infiltration. Dr. Alex Kumar could speak several languages and was good at pretending to be someone else. Corporal Lisa Park was their pilot backup, and Private Ben Wilson handled communications. Remember, Morrison told them in the final briefing, your job is to observe and gather information. Don't take unnecessary risks. We need you to come back. Alive with what you learn? Thompson nodded. Understood, Admiral? How long do we stay? 2 months maximum. If you're not back by then, we'll assume the worst and begin preparing Earth's defenses with whatever information we have. The Shadow Walker launched quietly in the middle of the night. Using the coordinates from the Vulcan refugees, they headed toward the nearest Dominion territory. The journey would take 3 weeks at maximum speed. During the flight, the team studied everything they knew about the Dominion. They practiced using the captured translation devices and learned to mimic the basic behavior patterns that Kellen had described. The hardest part was the disguises. They had to look like members of species that served the Dominion willingly. When they reached Dominion space, Thompson was amazed by what they found. Huge space stations orbited dead planets. Massive ships moved back and forth carrying cargo that Thompson realized must be slaves. The scale of the operation was beyond anything humans had imagined. Their first stop was a supply station near the border. The Shadow Walker docked without any problems. The Dominion's identification systems accepted their fake credentials. Thompson and Chen went aboard, dressed as traders from a species called the Nexari, who worked with the Dominion by choice. What they saw inside the station made them sick. Beings from dozens of different species worked in the lower levels, all wearing control collars around their necks. They moved like robots, with no expression in their eyes. Guards walked among them, carrying shock sticks. Chen pretended to examine some equipment while actually recording everything with a hidden camera. Thompson talked to one of the station managers, trying to gather information about Dominion operations. Business is good, the manager told Thompson. We just processed 3 new worlds in this sector. Lots of strong workers for the mining colonies. What about the warrior species? Thompson asked, trying to sound casual. I heard there was a new one being evaluated. The manager checked his computer. Oh yes, the humans from that blue planet. They look promising for the gladiator pits. Good. Muscle development. Natural aggression. The harvest ships should reach them within 2 years. Thompson felt his blood turn cold, but he kept his expression neutral. Sounds profitable. Over the next 6 weeks, Thompson's team visited 4 different stations and 1 planet-based processing center. What they discovered was a horror beyond imagination. The Dominion had been enslaving species for over 3,000 years. They had refined the process to a terrible science. When they arrived at a world, they would first disable all communication systems to prevent calls for help. Then they would deploy control satellites that could shut down any technology on the planet's surface. After that, transport ships would land and begin loading people like cargo. But Thompson also noticed something important. The Dominion forces seemed lazy and overconfident. They had been winning so easily for so long that they barely bothered with security measures. Their ships were powerful but slow. Their soldiers were well equipped but poorly trained. At the processing center on a planet called Vex 7, Sergeant Torres discovered the most valuable intelligence of all. While pretending to deliver supplies, he accessed a computer terminal that showed the complete Dominion military structure for their sector. Commander Torres whispered into his communicator, "You need to see this. They're not as strong as they pretend to be." The files Torres found showed that the Dominion controlled their empire through fear and reputation rather than actual military might. Most of their fleet consisted of old, slow cargo ships designed for transporting slaves, not fighting battles. Their actual warships were scattered across hundreds of star systems, usually just one or two per sector. Even more important, Torres discovered that the Dominion had never faced serious resistance. Every species they encountered either surrendered immediately or was defeated so quickly that word of effective resistance tactics never spread. Dr. Kumar made another crucial discovery while interviewing some of the slave overseers. The control collars that kept slaves obedient used a specific radio frequency to transmit commands directly to the brain, but the same frequency was used throughout the Dominion for all their communication systems. "If we could find a way to disrupt that frequency," Kumar told Thompson, "we might be able to cause chaos in their entire network." Lieutenant Chen found the location of the sector's main slave processing hub, a fortress world called Kethra Prime. According to the data she gathered, over 50 million beings from dozens of species were held there, waiting to be transported to their final destinations. "It's like a giant warehouse for people," Chen reported. "But Commander, the security there is surprisingly light. They have some orbital defenses, but most of their ships are just cargo vessels." As their 2 months came to an end, Thompson's team had gathered more intelligence than they had dared to hope for. They knew the Dominion's military structure, their methods of control, and most importantly, their weaknesses. On the flight back to Earth, Thompson reviewed all their findings. The Dominion was powerful, but they were also arrogant and unprepared. For real resistance, they had grown comfortable with easy victories over peaceful species. But humans were not peaceful by nature. They had a long history of warfare and had developed tactics for fighting against superior forces. If they could strike first and strike hard, they might be able to win. When the Shadow Walker arrived back at Earth, Admiral Morrison was waiting. In the hangar, she could see from Thompson's expression that he had brought back valuable information. "What did you find, Commander?" she asked. Thompson handed her a data chip containing everything they had recorded. "Admiral, the Dominion is strong, but they have a weakness. They've never fought anyone who fights back effectively. I think we can beat them, but only if we hit them before they know we're coming." Morrison looked at the data chip in her hand. "The fate of humanity might depend on what was stored inside this small device. Get some rest, Commander," she said. "Tomorrow we start planning Earth's survival." Part 3. The preparation. The data from Commander Thompson's mission spread across Earth like wildfire, in secret meetings around the world. Leaders studied the intelligence reports and came to the same conclusion: humanity had to act fast or face slavery. General Robert Hayes stood in the newly built war room beneath the Pentagon, looking at screens showing military bases across every continent. Never before had Earth united so completely for a single purpose. Countries that had been enemies for decades were now working together to save their species. Status report. Hayes called out to his staff. Colonel Diana Foster stepped forward with her tablet. "Sir, we have military production facilities running, 24 hours a day in 37 countries. The Chinese are producing ship hulls. The Americans are building weapon systems. The Europeans are working on electronics, and the Russians are handling propulsion systems." Hayes nodded. It was the largest military buildup in human history, and they were doing it in complete secrecy. The general population still had no idea that alien slavers were coming for them across the Atlantic. Dr. Lisa Chen was having the most important breakthrough of her career. In her laboratory in Geneva, she had been studying the Dominion control collars that Thompson's team had brought back. For weeks, she had been trying to understand how they worked. The frequency is the key, she explained to her research team. These callers send signals directly to the brain using a specific radio wave pattern. But look at this. She showed them a computer model on the main screen. The same frequency appears in all Dominion technology. Their ship computers, their weapon systems, even their personal communication devices, all use variations of this same pattern. Dr. Martin Webb, her lead assistant, looked confused. But wouldn't that make their systems vulnerable to interference? Chen smiled for the first time in weeks. Exactly. They've used the same basic technology for so long that they never considered it might be turned against them. If we can build a device that broadcasts a reverse signal on this frequency, we can disrupt their entire network. She pulled up another screen showing brain scans. But here's the really interesting part. The Dominion officers have cybernetic implants that help them coordinate during battles. These implants also use the same frequency system. If we disrupt it, they won't be able to communicate or think clearly. Meanwhile, Captain Reed was working with the Vulcan engineers who had survived the attack on their ship. Kalen had offered to help humanity prepare for the coming war, and his technical knowledge was proving invaluable. Your weapons are powerful, but simple, Kalen explained as he examined a human missile. The Dominion uses energy shields that can stop most projectile weapons. But I think we can modify your missiles to get through. Reed watched as Kalen worked with human engineers to develop what they call ghost rounds, missiles that could phase through energy barriers by matching their frequency to the shield's harmonics. Your ships are also too easy to detect, Kalen continued. Dominion sensors look for specific energy patterns. But if we can mask those patterns, your ships might appear to be space debris or asteroids. The human engineers were fascinated by Vulcan technology. Working together, they developed phantom drives that could hide a ship's energy signature and make it nearly invisible too. Dominion Sensors. President Santos stood before a joint session of Congress, knowing that what she was about to say would change the world forever. For months, only a few dozen people had known about the alien threat. Now it was time to tell everyone. My fellow Americans and citizens of the world, she began. I must share with you a truth that will test our courage and our unity. We are not alone in the universe, and we are in grave danger. The room erupted in shocked whispers as Santos explained about the Dominion, the enslaved species, and the threat to Earth. She showed videos from Thompson's mission and testimonies from the Vulcan survivors. The enemy will arrive within 2 years, she continued. But we will not wait for them to come to us. We will strike first, strike hard, and show them that humanity bows to no one. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every nation on Earth pledged their resources to the war effort. Civilians volunteered to work in factories. Scientists offered their research. Even retired military personnel came forward to help. Train new recruits? General Hayes found himself in charge of the largest military operation ever attempted. The plan, codenamed Operation Thunderstrike, was simple in concept but massive in scale, hit the Dominion. So hard and so suddenly that they would never have a chance to retaliate against Earth. We have identified 3 primary targets, Hayes explained to the Joint Military Command. First, the Slave Processing Center at Kethra Prime. This will free millions of enslaved beings and deal major blow to Dominion operations. Second, the Sector Command Base at Nexus Station. This controls their military communications for this entire region. Third, their main supply depot at Terminus Port. Admiral Morrison studied the battle plans. General, we're talking about coordinated attacks across multiple star systems. The timing will have to be perfect. That's why we're building the largest fleet humanity has ever assembled, Hayes replied. 300 ships, all equipped with the new technology our people have developed. Not all of the ships were military vessels. Cargo ships, passenger liners, and even some private yachts were being converted into warships. The Earth's entire commercial spaceflight industry had volunteered for the mission. Captain Tommy Rodriguez had commanded a cargo hauler for 15 years. Now he stood on the bridge of his converted ship, the Braveheart, looking at weapon systems he never thought he would need. Sir, his new weapons officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, reported. The Ghost Round launchers are ready, and the Phantom drive is operating normally. Rodriguez nodded. Like hundreds of other civilian captains, he had volunteered to join the attack fleet. The idea of his children being enslaved by aliens was something he could not accept. Dr. Chen's neural disruptor project was nearing completion. Her team had built a device that could broadcast the reverse frequency signal across an entire star system. The disruptors were installed on special ships that would accompany the attack fleet. The effect should last for several hours, Chen explained to Admiral Morrison during a final test. During that time, any Dominion personnel with cybernetic implants will be confused and unable to coordinate properly. The training programs were intense. Human soldiers learned to fight in zero gravity and on alien worlds. Pilots practiced flying ships with the new stealth technology. Medical teams studied alien biology so they could treat wounded prisoners and slaves. Commander Thompson led the training for infiltration specialists. Remember, he told his students, the Dominion has ruled through fear for thousands of years. They expect their enemies to surrender or run away. They have never faced an opponent who fights back with intelligence and determination. As the months passed, Earth transformed from a peaceful world into a fortress preparing for war. Factories that once made cars now produce spacecraft. Universities that taught literature now researched alien technology. Children played games, pretending to be space soldiers fighting evil aliens. But through it all, the people of Earth maintained their hope. They had learned that they were not alone in the universe, and that there were others who needed their help. The enslaved species of the galaxy had been waiting for someone to break their chains. General Hayes stood in the command center, looking at the massive display showing the positions of all human forces. In 6 months, they would launch the largest military operation in history. Success would mean freedom for billions of enslaved beings. Failure would mean the end of human independence forever. Status of the fleet? He asked. All ships are ready, sir, Colonel Foster reported. Weapons loaded, crews trained, and supplies stocked. The neural disruptors are installed and tested. The Vulcan advisors are aboard the command ships. Hayes looked at the countdown timer on the wall. 23 days until Operation Thunderstrike began. 23 days until humanity would show the galaxy what happened when you threatened their freedom. Around the world, families said goodbye to their loved ones who were joining the mission. Parents hugged their children. Spouses promised to return home. And everyone understood that. They were part of something bigger than themselves. They were fighting for the freedom of every intelligent being in the galaxy. Part 4. To strike the human fleet gathered in the darkness beyond Pluto, 300 ships of every size and design. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, the largest warship humanity had ever built. Around her, the command. Crew worked quietly at their stations, knowing that the next few hours would determine the fate of their species. All ships report ready, Admiral, Commander Thompson announced from his position at the communications station. Morrison looked at the tactical display showing the positions of every ship in the fleet. Cargo haulers flew alongside military cruisers. Passenger ships had been turned into troop transports. Even some old mining vessels had been equipped with weapons for this mission. Dr. Chen, status of the neural disruptors? Morrison asked. All. Systems green, Admiral, Chen replied from her station. The disruptor ships are in position and ready to broadcast on your command. The plan was complex, but had been practiced hundreds of times. The fleet would jump to hyperspace simultaneously and emerge at 3 different locations in Dominion territory. The largest group would attack Kethra Prime, the slave processing center. Smaller groups would hit the command base and supply depot at the same time. General Hayes to all ships came the voice over the communication system. This is it, people. We go in fast, we hit them hard, and we show them that humanity protects the innocent. All ships prepare for jump. Captain Rodriguez gripped the arms of his chair aboard the converted cargo ship Braveheart. His crew of 12 had been dock workers and cargo handlers 6 months ago. Now they were heading into battle against an alien empire. Sir, his navigator called out, jump coordinates locked in. Rodriguez looked around his small bridge. These people had become his family during the training months. Remember, we stick to the plan and watch out for each other. Everyone goes home. On the Defiance, Admiral Morrison gave the final command. All ships, jump now. 300 ships vanished from normal space in a brilliant flash of light. For several minutes they traveled through hyperspace toward their targets. Then they emerged back into normal space around the fortress world of Kethra Prime. The Dominion garrison was completely unprepared. The orbital stations around the planet showed no signs of alert. Their ships floated peacefully at anchor, cruise, probably going about their normal routines. They were expecting routine cargo ships bringing new slaves, not a massive attack fleet. All ships begin the attack, Morrison commanded. The human fleet spread out across the space around Kethra Prime, like a deadly cloud. The Phantom Drive technology worked perfectly, the Dominion. Sensors were reading the human ships as asteroids or space debris. Dr. Chen activated the neural disruptors. Visible signals spread across the system, targeting the cybernetic implants that Dominion officers used to coordinate their forces. Within minutes, the effect was clear. Dominion ships began moving erratically, their crews confused and unable to work together properly. Captain Rodriguez watched as the brave Hart's weapons officer fired their first ghost rounds at a Dominion cargo ship. The missiles passed right through the enemy's energy shields, as if they weren't there, striking the hull with devastating effect. Direct hit, the weapons officer shouted. Their shields can't stop our new rounds. Across the battle zone, human ships were having the same success. The weapons that Earth's engineers had developed were tearing through Dominion, defenses that had protected the Empire for thousands of years. Commander Thompson led a squadron of fighter ships toward the orbital defense platforms around Kethra Prime. The small, fast human fighters moved like angry hornets, darting between the massive Dominion structures and firing ghost rounds at critical systems. "This is easier than we expected," Thompson's wingman reported. "Their defense systems are offline, and their fighters aren't even launching." Thompson could see why. Through the cockpit of his fighter, he watched Dominion personnel stumbling around, on the platforms, holding their heads as if in pain. The neural disruptors were working better than anyone had hoped. On the surface of Kethra Prime, the Liberation Force was already landing. Colonel Torres led 3,000 soldiers and converted transport ships, heading for the massive slave compounds that covered the planet's surface. The landing was unopposed. Dominion guards were scattered across the ground, their cybernetic systems disrupted by chance broadcasts. Some were unconscious. Others were stumbling around, unable to focus on anything. Torres and his soldiers ran through the compound gates that had held millions of prisoners. What they found inside made some of the hardest soldiers cry. Beings from dozens of different species were packed into small cells, all wearing the control collars that kept them obedient. "Get those collars off them," Dorda shouted to his teams. The human soldiers had been trained to remove the control devices safely. As each collar came off, the prisoners seemed to wake up from a deep sleep. Many fell to their knees, weeping. Others looked around in amazement, as if seeing clearly for the first time in years. A tall, thin being with purple skin approached Torres. The alien spoke in a language the soldier didn't understand, but the universal translator on his belt converted the words. "Are you here to free us?" the alien asked, hope filling his voice. "Yes," Torres replied. "You're free now. All of you are." Free word spread through the compounds like wildfire. Beings who had been slaves for decades were removing their own chains and helping to free others. The sound of breaking metal filled the air as control collars were smashed against the ground. Back in space, Admiral Morrison watched as the Dominion fleet tried to mount a defense. Captains were giving contradictory orders. Navigation systems were failing. The neural disruptors had turned the mighty Dominion war machine into a collection of confused, helpless vessels. Admiral, her tactical officer, reported, "Enemy ship attempting to escape the system." Morrison looked at her display. One Dominion cruiser was trying to reach the edge of the system where it could jump to hyperspace and carry word of the attack to other Dominion forces. "All ships priority target," Morrison announced. "Don't let that ship escape." 20 human vessels converged on the fleeing cruiser. Ghost rounds hammered through its shields and tore apart its engines. The ship spun helplessly in space, no longer a threat to anyone. Captain Rodriguez and his crew were boarding a Dominion cargo ship filled with newly captured slaves. The human soldiers moved carefully through the corridors, helping freed prisoners and securing any remaining guards. "Captain," one of his crew members called out, "you need to see this." Rodriguez followed the soldier to a large cargo hold filled with beings in suspended animation chambers, thousands of them, from many different species, all waiting to be transported. 2 lives of slavery. Wake them up," Rodriguez ordered. All of them. As the chambers opened, one by one, the freed beings looked around in wonder. Many had expected to wake up on slave worlds, forced to work until they died. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by their liberators. The battle was moving faster than anyone had planned. Dominion resistance was collapsing across all 3 target systems. The neural disruptors had been more effective than the most optimistic projections. Enemy ships were surrendering or simply shutting down their systems. On Kethera Prime, Colonel Torres stood in what had been the main administration building of the slave processing center. The Dominion officials who had run this place were now prisoners themselves, though the humans treated them far better than they had treated their slaves. "Status report," Torres called to his team leaders. "All compounds secured, sir," came the reply. "We estimate over 50 million beings freed across the planet. Medical teams are treating the worst cases, and the aliens are organizing themselves into groups by species." Torres looked out the window at the compounds that had once held so much suffering. Now they were filled with beings celebrating their freedom, many for the first time in decades. Admiral Morrison received similar reports from the other attack sites. The command base had been captured with minimal resistance. The supply depot was secured, cutting off resources to Dominion forces. Across the sector, Admiral Dr. Chen reported, enemy communications are down across all 3 systems. They can't call for reinforcements or warn their other bases about our attack. Morrison allowed herself a small smile. The plan had worked better than they had dared to hope. Not only had they freed millions of slaves, but they had done it without losing a single human ship. The liberation of Kethera Prime was complete. Part 5. The new Dawn Captain Reed walked through the liberated compounds of Kethera Prime, still amazed by what he was seeing. Everywhere he looked, beings from dozens of different species were working together to tear down the structures that had held them prisoner. The sound of metal being torn apart filled the air, but it was a joyful sound, the sound of freedom. An elderly Vulcan approached him, moving slowly on legs that had been weakened by years of captivity. Reed recognized him immediately. It was Nomar, one of the survivors from the ship they had rescued months ago. The old Vulcan's eyes were filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. "Captain Reed," Nomar said, his voice shaking with emotion. "When we first met you, we told you that your people had been cataloged as primitive by the Dominion. Now, I understand their greatest mistake." Reed helped steady the old alien as they walked. "What do you mean?" The Dominion thought. "Primitive meant weak," Nomar replied. "They never understood that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to accept defeat. Your people have done something that no species has accomplished in 3,000 years. You broke the chains of the Dominion." Around them, the freed slaves were organizing themselves into groups. Beings who had forgotten their own names were remembering their identities. Families separated for decades were finding each other again. Children born in captivity were seeing the sky without bars for the first time. Dr. Chen was working with a team of liberated scientists from various species, studying the captured Dominion technology. What they were discovering was changing their understanding of the Galactic Empire. The Dominion controlled over 1,000 worlds, explained Vex, a tall blue-skinned being who had been forced to work as a researcher for his captors. But their control was based entirely on fear and the belief that resistance was impossible. Chen looked at the data they had recovered from the Dominion computers. The numbers were staggering, billions of intelligent beings living as slaves. Across hundreds of star systems, all controlled by an empire that was much smaller than it appeared. How many actual Dominion citizens are there? Chen asked. Vex checked the records. According to these files, only about 50 million true Dominion members control the entire empire. The rest of their forces are either enslaved soldiers or species that serve them out of fear. This revelation spread quickly through the human command structure. The mighty Dominion was not a massive military power. It was a relatively small group that had built their empire on the myth of their own invincibility. Admiral Morrison stood in the command center aboard the Defiance, reading reports from across the 3 captured systems. The liberation was proceeding better than anyone had hoped. Over 60 million beings had been freed, and not a single human life had been lost in the operation. Admiral Commander Thompson reported, "We're receiving communication requests from species throughout this sector. Word is spreading that the Dominion can be defeated." Morrison looked at the star map showing their current position. What kind of communications? Requests for help, mostly? There are uprising attempts starting on at least 12 worlds. Species that have been enslaved for generations are trying to break free. This was something the planners had hoped for, but hadn't dared count on. The victory at Kethra Prime was inspiring enslaved peoples across the galaxy to rebel against their captors. Colonel Torres was helping coordinate the relief efforts on the planet's surface. Medical teams from Earth were working alongside liberated doctors and healers from many species to treat the worst cases of abuse and neglect. "Colonel," one of his lieutenants called out, "you need to see this?" Torres followed the officer to a large area where representatives from different species were gathering. What he saw made him stop in amazement. They were organizing themselves. Forming what looked like a government, a female being with silver skin and 4 arms stepped forward. Her translator device converted her words into English. "I am Zara, formerly a slave supervisor, now speaking for the Kethari people. We wish to thank the humans for our freedom, and we want to join your fight against the Dominion." Similar statements came from representatives of other species. The Velkans, the Nexari who had been forced to serve the Dominion, the Thraxians, who had been enslaved for over a century, all of them wanted to join the fight for galactic freedom. Torres realized he was witnessing the birth of something entirely new. An alliance of free species united against the Dominion Empire. Back on Earth, President Santos addressed the world with the news of the mission's success. The entire planet celebrated as they learned that humanity had not only saved themselves, but had freed millions of other beings in the process. "Today marks the beginning of a new era," Santos announced. "We have learned that we are not alone in the universe, and that there are others who value freedom as much as we do. The age of the Dominion is ending, and the age of the Free Alliance begins." Dr. Chen's analysis of the captured Dominion records revealed the true scope of their enemy. The Empire controlled over 1,000 worlds, but their military was spread thin across vast distances. Most importantly, they had never faced organized resistance on this scale. Their entire strategy is based on quick conquest and psychological warfare. Chen explained to the military leadership. They defeat a world quickly, then use that victory to frighten other worlds into surrendering. But now that myth is broken. Captain Reed met with Kalen and other Velkan leaders to discuss the future. The old Velkan had become something of a leader among the freed prisoners, helping to organize the different species and plan their next moves. "What will you do now?" Reed asked. Kellen looked out at the compound where thousands of beings were preparing to leave for their home worlds. "Some of us will return home to rebuild what the Dominion destroyed, but others want to join your fight. We have seen what humans can accomplish when they refuse to give up." The logistics of the liberation were enormous. Ships were being organized to carry freed slaves back to their homeworlds. Others were being converted into hospitals and supply vessels. The human fleet was transforming from a military force into a humanitarian mission. Admiral Morrison received a priority message from Earth. More ships were being sent to help with the relief efforts. along with supplies and medical personnel. But there was also military reinforcement coming. Earth was preparing for the Dominion's inevitable counterattack. They'll have to respond, Morrison told her staff. We've humiliated them in front of the entire galaxy. They can't let this stand. Right. The Dominion's response was weaker than expected. The remaining forces in the sector were mostly cargo ships and lightly armed patrol vessels. The real military power was hundreds of light years away. It would take time for them to organize a response. That time was being used wisely by the newly formed Free Alliance. Representatives from 43 different species met aboard the human ship Unity to sign the Charter of Free Worlds. It was a document that declared their independence from the Dominion and their commitment to protecting each other's freedom. The signing ceremony was broadcast across dozens of star systems. Beings who had lived their entire lives in slavery watched as their representatives declared their freedom and pledged to fight. For others still in chains, Commander Thompson was assigned to lead the first joint mission of the Free Alliance. His ship, now crewed by humans and aliens working together, was heading to a nearby system where another slave revolt had begun. It's amazing, Thompson told his mixed crew as they prepared for their mission. 6 months ago, Earth didn't even know there was life beyond our solar system. And we're part of an alliance spanning hundreds of worlds. His tactical officer, a former Dominion slave named Court, looked up from his station. Commander, my people have a saying, the darkest night ends when someone lights the first flame. Back on Kethra Prime, the last of the slave compounds were being dismantled. The metal was being recycled into materials for new construction schools, hospitals, and meeting halls where free beings could gather and plan their futures. Captain, Reed stood with Nomar on the hill overlooking what had once been the largest slave processing center in the sector. Now it was becoming something entirely different, a symbol of hope and freedom. What happens next? Reed asked the old Velkin. Nomar smiled. Something Reed had never seen him do before. We do what the Dominion never thought possible. We show the galaxy that freedom is stronger than fear, that hope is more powerful than despair. The Dominion ruled for 3,000 years by making people believe they could never be defeated. That lie dies here.
In the distance, ships from
dozens of worlds were arriving and departing, carrying the message of freedom to every corner of the galaxy. The age of the Dominion was ending, and the age of the Free Alliance had begun.